Welcome to the EndZone YouTube. Let's move the chains here with James Larson to discuss the AJ McCarron news. Sorry, I've been kind of in hibernation, but news like this got to bring you out for spring football. James, how are you doing?
Doing good, and yeah, I agree with you on that one. I mean, you can't ignore something quite like this. This is honestly probably one of the biggest shakeups we've ever seen in spring football, at least in modern history, when it comes to just the way AJ McCarron has been such a big part of St. Louis and that football team in the last 2 years. Someone of his magnitude and just of his knowledge. You talk UFL, you talk XFL, you think AJ McCarron, like he's one of the top names that comes to mind. So this is big.
Exactly. So I think we should go over the context of the situation with AJ McCarron. So a couple days ago, the St. Louis Battlehawks posted on their Twitter a graphic that AJ McCarron wouldn't be returning with the Battlehawks. The graphic kind of made it seem a little like maybe AJ McCarron wouldn't play. We didn't really get the whole situation of what was going on. AJ McCarron posted on his social media a very cryptic message and basically said that he was going to explain the entire situation at 2 p.m. I think it was Eastern time on a radio show that AJ goes on to talk football. It's like a Mississippi radio show. And then he went on that radio show yesterday and he had some pretty, I think, revealing words about the situation, how everything went down. I definitely encourage people to go listen. But I guess where should we start in a sense of like AJ McCarron's situation with the Battlehawks? How you think that went down?
Yeah, I think it ended up being a little uglier than it was supposed to be, where AJ pretty clearly in that interview he talks about how towards the end of last season he kind of felt like they were going to be parting ways at some point, just with the way the atmosphere was, the environment there, the coaching staff. Not that AJ didn't appreciate them or that they didn't appreciate AJ. It just felt like, you spend 2 seasons there, you have 2 winning seasons, but no playoff wins to show for it. And you kind of start to wonder, like, okay, is a team going to go in a different direction? So then a couple months ago, this is all according to AJ, of course. We don't really know Beck's side of the story since he hasn't made any comments on this. Which, speaking of, we can get into that later. Beck did hold a press conference on Friday when they made this announcement, but didn't really get into details of this. Anywho, for AJ McCarron, he starts hearing a couple months ago from other UFL coaches not associated with the St. Louis Battlehawks that he is potentially going to be traded. St. Louis is looking to get, basically put him somewhere else and get something in return. So that then AJ eventually reaches out to Anthony Becht. They have this phone call, and yeah, there's so many details we can get into, but this ended up being a lot messier than it was supposed to be, I feel like.
Yeah, he had the phone call with Becht and basically said, "Hey, if you trade me somewhere, I'm just, I'm not going to be traded." Like that was the thing because he's obviously very committed to winning a championship, and his thought process was, well, you're not going to trade me to another team and get two important pieces out of that trade. I'm just going to be a free agent basically and go wherever I want. And the way that the contracts work for the UFL is what they start in January. So basically he's been waiting for his rights to expire,
Right.
so he could go somewhere else. So then the Battlehawks basically just dropped him, without even telling him, except for social media. He said that he learned about him being dropped via social media because his son was on Twitter or Instagram or something and saw the graphics. So he wasn't even told about being dropped. And there are
And
potential
it's one of those things where obviously he knew he wasn't going to be back in St. Louis based on the phone call he had with Anthony Becht, but the phone call was very tension filled. There was
yes.
tempers on both sides. But according to AJ, they did kind of leave off on at least a decent note, right? These are guys that have worked together for the last 2 years, both have a ton of respect for each other. And Anthony apparently told AJ, like, hey, look, we want to do this the right way. We want to send you off with respect, with dignity. We really appreciate all you've done for this organization. And we are going to make sure that we reach out to you and have some sort of joint statement come out with the league, with the St. Louis Battlehawks account, and, basically do it together. And then all of a sudden, the Battlehawks release this thing. Anthony Becht has a statement out there. Anthony Becht holds a press conference, and AJ McCarron wasn't told about any part of that at all. That, to me, that is problematic. Those are the types of things that, like, give spring football a bad look, and I wish that they wouldn't happen. Because, yes, was the send-off post to AJ McCarron very nice? Yeah, of course. On surface level, it looks nice, but there's a lot more behind the scenes. There's a lot more to it when you actually go down to the roots and see what actually happened. And, yeah, it ended up being messier than what we thought, and this all could have been avoided if AJ was just communicated with properly.
Yes, and then also the fact that there could be some potential tampering with, and I don't know
Yeah.
how the UFL is gonna handle this. I would think that they would launch some sort of investigation into what's happening, because the fact that you have other coaches telling a player that they're on the trading block, and then the whole situation is just bad. I think from all sides, and it seems to me that there's a lack of communication, and maybe some other coaches, I don't know who the coaches were that AJ was talking to. They're obviously his friend, but maybe something you shouldn't say to a current
And
player on another team.
you would assume that those coaches are on the XFL side, only because AJ was in the XFL the year prior. It seems like these are coaches or a coach that he's had a friendship with, he's had a relationship with. So obviously, who really knows? But it would make more sense if that coach was on the XFL side of things, or coaches, excuse me, because that's where AJ was in 2023.
Yeah, and he mentioned that, like, they were on call with Andy Becht and the GM, and there was some confusion because Beck said we reached out to multiple teams, and then when AJ asked, then Beck was like, "Well, according to AJ McCarron, it was only one team."
And we haven't heard back yet, apparently.
Yeah, and
Like
we haven't heard back yet, and it's like, oh, okay.
I'd love to at some point hear Anthony Beck's side of this, because I feel like that would help fill in some more details on what actually happened, because there's quite a bit. And to briefly talk about the press conference that Beck had, it was really interesting because he didn't really mention anything at all about his conversations with AJ, and it's pretty clear that AJ was not retiring or is not retiring, and that he wants to play. And that's what really irked AJ in Beck's comment that went out on social media from the Battlehawks account, is that it made it seem like, they were doing AJ a favor because, he might hang it up. He needs to figure out what he's doing. AJ knew what he wanted to do. He wanted to come back to St. Louis. So the way that played out specifically feels like Beck kind of just did his own thing and was like, all right, screw you, AJ. Like, we're done here.
Yeah.
Is that how he intended it to be? Maybe not. Probably not. But that's how it came across. That's how it came across to AJ. And now Becht is going to have a pretty big target on his back if AJ ends up signing with another team.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's a good segue into talking about certain landing spots, and then the certain things that AJ mentioned on this call, basically, or on the radio, that he was looking for. I think the first one was that he wanted to play St. Louis twice. It feels like he's sort of on the petty train. I'm not saying he's petty, but like there's some of that.
Well, he kind of is. I mean, that's kind
Yeah.
of been his bread and butter throughout his career and his time in the UFL and XFL. I mean, he's gone back and forth with guys plenty of times. I mean, we just remember the little scuffles he had with Tease Tabor over in San Antonio this season. So I kind of love it, if I'm being honest. I feel like this is the type of drama that you did.
It
This
makes
is the
you
type
a
of stuff that you
competitor.
see in the NFL, in the NBA, in the NHL, things like that. Like, we need this in the UFL. Is it the greatest look for the league? Not entirely, but it brings the tension. Look at all the posts about this are blowing up on social media. Like,
Yeah.
this is publicity for the league, whether it's great or not. It is publicity, so
Yeah.
it
It
gets people
truly is
talking.
a wild story. Like, if this happened in the NFL, a situation like this where a player was on another team, like, this would be, tampering. Like, this would be a big story, right?
Right.
So, or tampering allegations at least, and then just the way everything was handled, you'd have people talking about it. So it is a unique story. And we don't obviously we don't really know what all happened. We only have one point of view, and it was only like 20 minutes talking about it. Obviously, this is way more complex and in depth. So we really may be irresponsible to form conclusions.
Yeah, I mean, Well, I feel like at some point more of this story is going to come out, and it's going to fill some of the holes for us. But until then, we just have to speculate a little bit and try to put the pieces together.
Yeah, yeah. So he did mention he would like to play St. Louis twice. So I thought about this, and immediately you think, okay, XFL conference. But then you think, well, if you're a USFL team and there are really only two teams that could really claim this, you could say, we'll play St. Louis maybe once in the regular season, but then how sweet would it be to play them in the championship and beat them, So I think that yes, XFL conference would be more likely to play twice, but if you're Michigan or obviously if you're Birmingham, then I feel like, you could make the case, say, AJ, just come win a championship with us, because those are two teams that have the ability to win championships, as we've seen.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways that we could break this down. And truthfully, there's not a lot of realistic landing spots for AJ, which is a little surprising because obviously he's one of the best in the spring football scene. He's been a fantastic fit with St. Louis. He's done tremendous things, but he is 34 and he is not getting any younger. And he is not a very mobile quarterback. And
Mm-hmm.
he's also coming off a high ankle sprain, which, as we could see at the end of last season, really, really hurt and impacted his play in a negative way. So, with that in mind, where could he realistically go? If we want to start on the XFL side of things, you've got San Antonio, right? They just signed Kellen Mond. That seems to be their quarterback of the future. They also have Kevin Hogan on the roster from last season. They traded away Quentin Dormady. They haven't brought Chase Garbers back yet. I feel like they probably won't. But if you already brought in Kellen Mond, someone that spring teams, by the way, have been trying to sign for multiple years, I don't think that you'd be able to sign Mond unless you're basically telling him, like, hey, look, you're going to be our guy unless you completely screw this up. Like, you are our starter. I don't see why the Brahmas would bring McCarron in when you already have Mond. That said,
Mm-hmm.
nothing's out of the realm of possibilities. It just wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. You have DC. That's a team that has only two young quarterbacks on the roster. They just signed Emory Jones. They also have Mike DeLilio, who was on the team last season out of Austin Peay. Neither one of those guys is proven. I feel like DC, if the Defenders want to win a championship, they'll really have to think this one through because McCarron, he doesn't exactly fit the scheme that they run there, right? They have Jordan Tomu the last couple of years, a guy who can run, a guy you can do RPOs with, and that's Fred Keiss, that's his bread and butter. That's what he does really well from a play calling standpoint. But at the same time, you have someone who clearly is capable of taking you to a championship. You're probably not bringing Jordan Tomu back at this point. And you just re-signed Abram Smith, who, mind you, was probably the best offensive player in the XFL in 2023. That, to me, would be the most realistic fit for A.J. McCarron if he were to go anywhere. And here's why. Arlington, they have Holden Ahlers and Lindsey Scott re-signed. Those are two younger guys that didn't see much playing time. Luis Perez, obviously one of the greatest stories in spring football. I'm told that he plans to return to the Renegades. It has not become official yet and probably won't for a while. But as of right now, barring any changes, his plan is to return to Arlington. If the Renegades take Louise back, there is no way that they would pursue AJ. I mean, there's just no shot. AJ and Louise, in my opinion, they're too close to each other on a performance standpoint that it wouldn't make sense for them to go get AJ if they already have Louise coming back. You have Michigan, right? I mean, they already re-signed their three quarterbacks in EJ Perry, Bryce Perkins, and Danny Etling. And the way Marcel Belfay ran that offense last year in Michigan, they need a mobile quarterback. They cannot
Yeah.
have someone that's going to be a pocket passer, so he doesn't fit the scheme there. And then finally, you have Birmingham, right? And that, I know that's the one that everybody's pushing for. Bring him back to Alabama. Put him in Birmingham. Get the Stallions. The ticket sales will definitely increase. It's a homecoming for him. He can finish his career there. I don't think it's happening. I spoke to a Birmingham source of mine yesterday who made it pretty clear they don't plan on pursuing AJ really at all. Now, in the interview that AJ had on the podcast yesterday, he said that he hadn't talked to Birmingham yet, and odds are they probably won't be talking, at least according to what I've heard. So could that change? Of course. But as it stands right now, I do not see the Stallions being a realistic landing spot for him just based on what my source told me. They're not looking for an aging quarterback, and they don't really care about the story, of him returning. They've got their eyes on younger guys, and I mean, for Birmingham, you're probably looking to try to get Matt Corral back or maybe even go out and get Alex Magoo, who's a free agent again. So those would be much better options for Birmingham if they want to run it back and win a championship. Although Could AJ work? Yeah. It just doesn't seem like they have any desire to pursue him.
Yeah, I think that I'm in agreement with you that DC is the favorite because also AJ talks about fit a lot and he wants to go to a team that he knows can win a championship. In the XFL, DC has shown that they have the ability to get there. They've got a lot of talented players. I think on Twitter recently, Davin Bellamy just tweeted out tagging AJ saying come to DC. They've also got like AJ to me seems like a person that he has to go to a place with a large fan base that would be there and support in a good environment because he I mean I don't know, I feel like he feeds off that energy and he don't like there's a reason why I left Houston and Memphis off of this because fit wise, well, can they win a championship? Probably not. The fan bases aren't large. The markets aren't really, you know, that great when you look at it that way.
Like, he would be going there to die, basically. Like,
Yeah,
that would not be a wave that he would want to go out personally. I mean, no disrespect to CJ Johnson, but I could only imagine what that would be like for the two of them to try to work together. Just based
yeah,
on what we saw from CJ this past season, based on what we saw from Johnson on TV, and based on the character that AJ McCarron is, there is absolutely no chance that they could clash or mesh. They would be clashing the entire season. It'd be a wreck. And you would be surrounding AJ McCarron with a bunch of guys that truthfully aren't all that proven in this scene for the most part. I mean, Houston's roster is probably the weakest one right now of any team. So
yes.
I don't see that happening.
And Memphis has been making a lot of moves as well. And it seems like they're going in a completely different direction and everything pretty much. And also, it's just I don't think he would want to go play for Memphis. Just in my opinion, I think that he probably would like to play like the top three destinations would be San Antonio, DC, and Birmingham. Birmingham for obvious reasons. He would probably love to play for the Stallions. One, because he's an Alabama guy. Two, I think he wants to win a championship. Like you could tell he wants to win a championship so much that he said, "No, you're not going to trade me because if I'm not playing for you, I don't want to make the Battlehawks better." Like that
Right.
that's how much of a team guy AJ is, which is a good thing. So like obviously going to Birmingham would be an attractive spot for him, but like you said, and this is my first thought, does Birmingham want AJ McCarron? And I think that's what it comes down to, which is
And
very
from what I'm
interesting.
told, they don't. So
Yeah.
Stallions fans, as much as I hate to say this for your sake, I wouldn't get your hopes up for a reunion because I don't think it's likely. I think it's much higher chance that we see them either A, bring in a completely new free agent the same way they've done that with quarterbacks basically every season with Martinez, Corral, Magoo, etc., or they're bringing back Corral and Magoo. I mean, either one of those things is much more likely to happen.
Yeah, and Skip Holtz does use that open offense where he loves to have some mobile guys, and he's also worked with the two quarterback system a lot. If he wants that mobility from a certain player, so he's kind of got his way, which is like for DC, if you get AJ McCarron, you definitely have to build everything around him. Like he's got to be your guy. You got to now change everything that you do to put him in place to win the championship. Because I think the team that gets him in a league where right now there are a lot of good quarterbacks on each team, except maybe question marks at the two USFL teams that we've talked about. But like he is the upper echelon, and you can't mess up bringing him in.
Exactly. And it's kind of like you don't want it to be a situation kind of like we're seeing with the New York Jets right now with Aaron Rodgers, where you bring in a talented quarterback, a guy who's got a great resume, but is getting up there in age, has been dealing with injuries, isn't playing at the full potential that we saw from him in the past, and has a team around him that just isn't exactly cohesive. I mean that is the type of thing that we could see with AJ if he goes to the wrong team.
Yeah. Yeah. And to me, Arlington is another, it's at least interesting. Like, say Luis Perez, say Arlington gets or has a chance to get AJ McCarron, and they just say, okay, you know, Luis, it's been great, but go find another team, and maybe Luis goes to DC, right? Um, that would be interesting because AJ has also voiced his complaints of traveling. So maybe even having the opportunity, if you're DC, to say, look, we can get to a championship. I know last year wasn't great, but you obviously got Bob Stoops, who I'd imagine has talked to AJ McCarron just because Bob Stoops is Bob Stoops. But um, I don't know. I think like Arlington is the kind of team just sitting in the back with maybe not as good odds, but they might be sneaky. I don't know of your feelings on that, but like if I'm
My
Arlington
gut
and I could
and
get Joe
a couple of
Biden,
things that I've been told makes it seem like they wouldn't pursue him. You know, based off the fact that one, it seems like Luis Perez is coming back, and two, I just based off a couple of the conversations I've had the last couple of days, just little things that have been said have maybe been like, okay, I don't think Arlington would actually happen, but
okay,
ultimately, who knows? I mean,
that's interesting.
we're not speaking to AJ McCarron directly, so
Yeah, yeah.
we'll
There's no idea how things could change, right? Maybe a quarterback from a certain team, whatever team says, "Oh, maybe I don't want to play this year." And I also put like on here may not play at the very bottom. Like obviously I think it's more likely that he plays, but if there's just no team that like is a good fit, like the only two suitors are Houston and Memphis, I'd be like, okay, maybe AJ McCarron just probably is like, oh, you know, I'll sit this year out maybe or something like that. Like if there is no perfect fit.
I mean, I don't see him sitting out just because, I mean, you know, at that age, if he sat out a year, would he even be able to get another shot after a year off? Another possibility is, does he consider a CFL opportunity? Because I'm
Yeah.
sure there would be a CFL team that would bring him in a heartbeat. I mean, I don't. I feel like he probably wouldn't, just because he seems like the type of guy that at this point of his career, why would he even bother to go up north? But it's certainly in the realm of possibilities.
Yeah, I mean it pays more, and he would be a big name in the league to play in the CFL. And I put this at the bottom because I think this is the least likelihood. I just wanted to put it in there because he said that he's definitely going to play, but also when you go look at the options, it's like the options are a little slim, and he has the right to be picky about where he goes late in his career with the resume that he's put together within spring football, right? So he's earned that right to be picky. So I just feel like there really is, like you said, one team that sticks out. It's the DC Defenders. So for me, it feels like DC or bust pretty much.
Right. And then, you know, DC, yes, is it a potentially good fit? Sure. But at the same time, McCarron is not at all Jordan Ta'amu. So it's like, would DC even consider it? Especially because it feels like the Defenders would rather probably get younger at this point. They just signed Emory Jones, a young quarterback out of Cincinnati, was just with the Ravens this preseason. Like, do you really want to bring in someone who's almost 35, or do you want to actually build around somebody who's young that you could probably have for a couple years and work towards a championship that way? And ultimately, it's going to come down to whether or not a team thinks that AJ McCarron will be the piece that they need to go win a championship. If he is
Yeah,
the piece, then sure. I mean, do whatever you can do to get him in there. But if not, he's absolutely not worth pursuing, because there's younger guys that you can build around and actually have a brighter future with.
yeah. I think that, I mean, obviously I don't know the coaches around the league and I don't know what they're thinking, but I do believe that he's seen as the hot commodity of the league. Like now that he's in free agency, I'm sure there are at least two or three teams who are like, okay, how can we get our hands on them? Also, two of those teams could be Houston and Memphis, which is like, I doubt that he would ever go to. What's your order if you had to rank the top? We'll do top three destinations in order, in terms of odds, where do you think he would go?
DC number 1. This is tough because
Yeah.
I'm like almost certain none of these teams would even pursue him, just based on what I've been told. DC number 1. I would go with San Antonio number 2.
Oh, wow.
Just because you never know. I mean, and really ultimately depends on if AJ Smith is back. Because if AJ Smith is back, I could see him wanting to run his offense with someone like AJ McCarron. You
Mm-hmm.
know, just pass the hell out of the ball and get the ball out of his hands quickly. That would be an interesting fit. I don't think it's likely, but I feel like it's more likely than Arlington or Birmingham, who would be
Yeah,
my 1A, 1B for the third spot. And I don't see him going to either one. I really see it as
so
DC or
wild.
bust, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah,
Michigan's not going to pursue him. Houston and Memphis, he wouldn't go there even if they wanted him. You're really left with very little options in an 18 league.
yeah. That's why this whole scenario is so interesting. I guess mine would be DC, and then it goes off of a cliff, and I just say Birmingham at 2, and then I would go a tie, and this is kind of cheating, but Arlington and San Antonio at 3. I could see maybe, so say San Antonio, they bring in Kellen Mond. Maybe they trade away Kellen Mond to DC. Like I see something like that being more likely, where a team trades away Kellen Mond to DC and then gets AJ McCarron in their system, right? Like I think that's the most likely thing other than just AJ going to DC.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a possibility, except I don't see why San Antonio would sign Kellen
Yeah.
and then be like, yeah, we'll give him up for AJ, who's 34 and isn't mobile. Like,
Also, you have to think that coaches around the league knew that AJ McCarron was being traded, right?
Right.
So why, if San Antonio knew that AJ was being traded, why in the world would they sign Kellen Mond? Is like, I think that is a good question that
Right.
you posed. Is
Because Mond was a relatively recent signing. And
yeah,
as of a couple months ago, people knew that in the league, at least, that AJ wasn't returning.
yeah,
So why would you go sign Mond if you knew that you had a chance to get AJ?
yeah.
I mean,
Unless this was
personally,
a
I would take
massive,
Mond over AJ regardless. But,
really,
I mean, I think he's got way more upside.
yeah. Just if I wanted to win a championship this year, I'd probably take AJ. But what if this were the case? What if it were a massive conspiracy? I'm putting my tinfoil hat on. And one of the coaches that AJ was talking to was from San Antonio. They signed and they told AJ McCarron, "Hey, you're being traded," basically to get him to not be traded. And then, shoot, I'm running off the rails here. And then they signed Kellen Mond only to use him as a trade piece to DC so that they could get players for Kellen Mond and get AJ McCarron for free. That would be the most
That would
I'm
be
playing
wild.
checkers move in the entire sports industry. That's like me trying to scheme trades for fantasy football, where I'm trying to
I
like think
mean,
2 steps ahead.
hey,
Obviously,
if that's what Mark Lillibridge is up to this offseason, then I'm tipping my hat to him because that would
then
be
he needs to go to
madly.
the NFL if he
that
was
would
able
be
to
that'd
orchestrate
be
that.
insane.
Awesome, awesome stuff.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, I feel like we covered it pretty good. I don't know what else to say because there's just so much more that has to come out. But do you have any other comments?
not necessarily. I mean, I feel like in general, it's an exciting time for spring football. We're only a month and a half away from 2025. Gonna be entering season 2, and I think it'll be fun to watch how these teams approach. Because you look at a team like Memphis, right, and they traded for Quentin Dormady, formerly of the Brahmas. A team like Memphis, they don't have anybody that I'm fully confident in at the quarterback position. They only rostered Troy Williams, formerly the Maulers quarterback, and he was with Memphis this past season. And you have Quentin Dormady. On paper, I don't see either one of those guys taking you to a championship. And then Houston, they've got Jalen McClendon, Nolan Henderson, and then the rookie that they signed in Davius Richard. I'm not too confident in that quarterback room either. So while it's like AJ would absolutely help those teams out a lot, I just don't see either one being the fit for him that he's looking for,
Yeah,
which is tough
and
because those would actually be the teams with the highest percentage of him going to and seeing success with when it comes to like actually getting in. But I just don't see AJ. AJ just wouldn't. There's just no way.
yeah, because and the reason why we're saying there's no way is because multiple times he said he wants to go to a
Yeah.
place that can win a championship. And he did say, that he wants to play St. Louis twice, so that
Right.
means XFL. And like if you're Houston, it's in Memphis, it's way harder to convince AJ McCarron that you're going to play St. Louis in the championship based off like he was in the league with those two teams. He knows what they play like and what things were like in the locker rooms and just their performance on the field. So I just find it hard to believe that he would be attracted to go to those spots. Whereas Birmingham I think has the highest likelihood given that situation to get it out of the USFL side, but I still think it's slim. And then based on what you said, that even just confirms some of my suspicions. But also I've changed some of my opinion just hearing what you've said, like about Arlington and other places just not being interested. So
Right. And that's the biggest problem that presents AJ right now is these teams already a lot of these teams already have the guys that they're locked into, right? With
yeah.
the exception of DC. Like you'd assume San Antonio's locked into Mond. Arlington seems like they're locked into Perez. Birmingham seems to be locked into whoever they're going to be getting back. And then Michigan, they already have their quarterbacks. And again, that's why I brought up Houston and Memphis, is because I don't see either Houston or Memphis being locked into any one of the guys that they have on the roster right now, because neither one of them is like really jumps off the paper. But
Yeah.
it just wouldn't make sense for AJ to go to either of those spots. So
Yeah.
you really
And
are left with
McClendon, he came from DC, correct?
yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
McClendon was traded. He was a backup for the Defenders this past year. He started a few games for the Vipers in 2023, and he's a guy that has potential, but like he would need to prove himself in training camp to actually be the guy.
Yeah.
Same goes
Well,
for Nolan Henderson, who was with Houston this last year, and then Davius Richard is brand new out of college.
yeah. Well, the defenders trading away Jalen McClendon and getting players for him and now being in position to AJ McCarron, it could just work out for them really well here,
Right?
this whole situation. So it also does feel like they are the favorite for many reasons. I feel like we could talk about hours for.
Absolutely. I mean, the what will be interesting is the fact that it seems like there is some sort of legitimate free agency point coming up here where the players that haven't re-signed to their respective UFL teams will have the opportunity to go elsewhere. So
Yeah.
we'll have to see how that all plays out. Still trying to narrow down exactly when that date is and how it all works. But from what I'm being told, that is something that's coming up soon, which means that we will definitely see some guys hopping from team to team, which will be a lot of fun.
Yeah. And AJ may not, he might be waiting and patient on his decision because he knows he also has a lot of leverage in this. Just from hearing him talk, it seems like he understands his point on that. So very interesting stuff, James. Thank you as always. I hope everybody watching enjoyed. We had a really good conversation on AJ McCarron, where he could be, where he may be or might not be.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me on as always, and looking forward to talking again soon.
Awesome. You have a good one.